in my mind about the epidemiology of orphan and rare disease was, okay, everyone, and for sure pharmaceutical companies, but also all the governmental agency, NIH ahead, they want prevalence of disease. And what was coming in my mind is that maybe this is a bias. How we can go with disease when is a rare disease that you have few specialists able to do the diagnosis. This is incorrect for an epidemiologist, because it means that if I go in the general population, I will find very few people, because you have very few physicians able also to do the diagnosis. And if I go as an epidemiologist in this general population, I cannot use the diagnosis as a way to recognize these people. I must go inside of the disease and take the criteria, the symptoms that the subject are presenting as my goal, not the disease. If I go with the disease, I have a problem. And guess what? When I look at the situation inside of the literature, I find that all what is published presently inside of rare disease and orphan disease is coming from health provider, data claim, physician inside of clinical center, hyper-specialized, and based on what? On a reported diagnosis. Exactly the most important problem that you can imagine. So the question, the following question was coming, how the symptom prevalence is contributing to the prevalence of a rare disease. And here, in my presentation, I am taking the example of narcolepsy. As you know, I am a sleep specialist, so it's easy for me to go through that. So again, how the symptom prevalence is contributing to prevalence of a rare disease? Try to imagine. I take narcolepsy. Narcolepsy, in short, if I am really elliptic on that and very succinct, I would say that narcolepsy is essentially excessive sleepiness and cataplexy. Probably more cataplexy than excessive sleepiness, because all the sleep specialists love cataplexy. You have a cataplexy, practically you are sure to have a diagnosis of narcolepsy. I am an iconoclast. I like to break the idols. And my question is, and if cataplexy was not what we pretend is to be the only representative of narcolepsy? And so we will follow a little my reasoning here, be without any kind of I would say, judgment, try to leave the things coming. So the prevalence and incidence of a disease are closely linked with nosography. In epidemiology, we only use the diagnosis, and my question is, are we condemning ourselves in understanding only a part of a more complex clinical picture? And for sure, as you can imagine, I think that we are condemning ourselves somewhere if we go only with the diagnosis. So I want to understand how key and associated symptoms are associated and evolve in a population. And I want to see if this is helping us to have a broader view of a disease. And a very general assertion, a diagnosis is, after all, simply the final destination of a collection of symptoms that light up the path toward a direction. If you want a big example, is that for narcolepsy, nosographic systems have come many, many times on what is inside of narcolepsy. And the variation is important, also in something so well defined that narcolepsy. So my objective through this study is to understand how prevalent narcolepsy symptoms are in the general population. Bluntly, the physicians are saying narcolepsy is excessive sleepiness and cataplexy. Deal. Why we don't go to see what is the prevalence of these two symptoms? Why to go to see only narcolepsy? Doing so, I hope to understand the association between the different narcolepsy symptoms and to have a better understanding of narcolepsy prevalence in the general population. This is something that can serve of model on any kind of rare disease, and for sure, when you say rare disease, disease that is not well treated, and for sure, orphan disease in the definition of the FDA. So to leave now the theoretical point of view that I have defended until now, we go in the facts and in the reality, real world evidence. So what are the participants of the population that I am taking as an example? Is a representative sample of the adult general population of the USA. A total of 15,929 subjects were interviewed during the first wave and 10,931 at follow-up. We lost practically 5,000 subjects between the two waves. That can be expected because the second wave is 3 to 5 years after the first one. And I want to insist, each subject of wave 1 is present in wave 2. I am not using any kind of artifact or any kind of subterfuge to keep my number of subjects. A subject that is not participating to the two waves is part of my loss. So the number that you have, 15,900 and 10,900, are for the people that were participating to the two waves. And so when I say it's it's very comfortable. When a fact happens, you have only to look at what wave. You don't need to say when you say is predictor, is not because it's a calculation, is because it's a fact. I love longitudinal study because of that. About 3 years or so elapsed between the first and second interview for each participant, and I insist, each participant. So we were using, as I was telling you at the beginning, for our institute, it will be an artificial intelligence system that is the AdInfer Eval system that was specially designed to administer diagnosis interview and conduct epidemiological study in the general population. It has a knowledge base that is comprise a standard questionnaire and diagnosis pathway covering the DSM-4. Don't forget, the study was starting in the early 2000s, DSM-5, and the International Classification of Sleep Disorder. We have also inside, I must say, again, also the classification of medical disorder, the ICD, inside of the database. The system formulates an initial diagnosis hypothesis and it attempts to confirm or reject it during the process. And like for a physician, concurrent diagnoses are allowed in accordance with DSM and ICSD. The ICSD is the International Classification of Sleep Disorder. The system terminates the interview once all diagnostic possibilities are exhausted. This system was validated in multiple studies, all published, and as you see in the reference, also the way that is built, this system is built on a mathematical processor that use the fuzzy logic. The fuzzy logic are mathematics, is not contrarily to the name itself, is not a logic. Fuzzy logic is first mathematics, and it was developed by that day. And during my thesis, I was using this fuzzy logic to incorporate it inside of the neural network of AdInfer. So I will pass on it. I suppose that if you want more detail, you can find it in the literature. So what are the narcolepsy symptoms? Very quickly, hypersomnolence, cataplexy, lax symptoms, and REM intrusion symptoms. If you ask me what is cataplexy, I will say that all the students in medicine are really astonished by when they see for the first time somebody having a cataplexy symptom in front of them. Is the subject is there in front of you, you push it to laugh or to have a big emotion, et voila, he's going directly in sleep, in REM sleep for sure. So it's an episode of muscle weakness precipitated by an intense emotion. And you can imagine why is REM sleep, because during the REM sleep, you have a muscular resolution. So they enter directly in the REM sleep, so they have no more the possibility to stay standing up. They go down immediately. So cataplexy is very spectacular. Hypersomnolence, that is the excessive sleepiness, it's more casual. People are understanding it, but is something very damageable, because when is a young child is finishing to sleep in front of his teacher, and the problem is that if he's not diagnosed with narcolepsy, the teacher will think that the child is not interested by what he's teaching, and this poor child will be punished for something that is a disease. So these are the narcolepsy, the symptoms. So immediately we can look in the general population what are the daily episodes of hypersomnolence by age. And you see, falls asleep easily anywhere daily. You see this number inside of the general population, and sudden and irresistible sleep daily. You see that the number, if you compare with the prevalence of narcolepsy, that is 0.04, you see that this number are all superior to what we have for narcolepsy. But you will not be surprised. You will say, okay, so hypersomnolence is more prevalent than narcolepsy. Probably cataplexy is rare, is why narcolepsy is at 0.04. And we can look at eventually if REM intrusion, because as you know, narcolepsy is a disease of the REM. Is that possible that sleep paralysis has a low prevalence? No, it's practically around 2%. It's possible that automatic behavior, one time per week, is rare? No, 3.7%. Are hypnagogic, hypnopompic hallucinations that are part of narcolepsy rare? 4.3%. Wow. And that for one time per week. When you take lifetime, it's more important. Everyone has experienced hypnagogic, hypnopompic hallucination. And you find 37% of the general population that have experienced hypnagogic hallucination or hypnopompic hallucination. So again, these numbers are not a prevalence of rare disease. So excessive sleepiness is high. 1-2% is not rare. 2 to 4% for the symptom of REM intrusion. Come on, this is not rare. So cataplexy must be very, very rare. And here, the prevalence of cataplexy lacks symptoms. Why lacks symptoms? Because the cataplexy, the sleep specialists are saying that it must be observed by a physician to be sure that is a cataplexy. So when you do an epidemiological study, it's better to say, because it's reported by the subject, so we say cataplexy lacks symptoms, that it means observed by the subject and not by a physician. Little nuance, but important. Daily cataplexy, you imagine daily cataplexy, 0.2%. Is not rare. Several times a week, 0.2. Once per week, 0.3. Once per month, 0.6. Again, is something like a little rare. but not so much, because if you look at the total, we have 1.3%. So now you have my problem as an epidemiologist. I know that the narcolepsy diagnosis in the general population is 0.04. Is my own studies, is my epidemiological study, I am sure. The methodology is impeccable. We were really very careful, and we have 0.04 of prevalence. So what is the problem there? How from symptoms that have a prevalence, not high, but comfortable, we go in something that is extremely rare, an orphan disease, according to the definition of the FDA, is because of the association. So I was looking at the association between hypersomnolence, REM intrusion, and cataplexy-like symptoms. It was the only explanation that I was finding about this very low prevalence of narcolepsy disease versus narcolepsy symptoms. So when I look again, only for memory, daily hypersomnolence prevalence 2.3%, REM intrusion prevalence 5.5, cataplexy-like episode prevalence 1.3. Look now my Venn diagram at the intersection. And here, you are surprised. Cataplexy with hypersomnolence is only 0.05. So cataplexy intersecting with REM intrusion is 0.01. And when you look at the other part, 0.28, it's probably with the REM intrusion that the cataplexy has the most overlap. But when you do the total of all of that, effectively, you get 0.04. Is the association between these symptoms that are producing a very low prevalence. So it means something, is that clinicians, when they say that they want to define the type 1 of narcolepsy, because now we have a type 1 narcolepsy and a type 2 narcolepsy. The type 1 narcolepsy is essentially defined on cataplexy. If we were doing that really, we must find a prevalence of 1.3. But because, happily, the sleep specialists are not seeing all the general population, they are seeing only the cataplectic that have also a daily hypersomnia, and is a reason for which the sleep specialists are saying cataplexy equal narcolepsy. But you must know, for an epidemiologist, this is not true. If you put that inside of the general population, you will have a lot of people that are not really narcoleptic because they will have cataplexy, but no really daily hypersomnolence. So here we have a danger, is that it means probably that we have to do studies to see if, for example, medications that we are using in narcolepsy can be a little more generalized for cataplectic subjects that have no hypersomnia. I have not the answer. All of that is just now. This study is just now. Probably a lot of pharmaceutical companies are not even aware of what I am telling you. Is that if you have a product that is working on cataplexy, you have to look at the general population. What it means, don't take your patients, the subject, coming only from clinical center. Go in the general population, and you will have an indication for cataplexy really. And cataplexy is 1.3% in the general population. So I will say that immediately we know that is presently some pharmaceutical companies that are very interested by this field. Probably their clinical trial in their recruitment are not using the right tools. That is my conclusion. But is very optimistic. Is not a critic. It's only science. We go finding new things, having new idea. And here it's this Venn diagram is a fact. You can have your interpretation. You will never remove this number. You will find exactly the same. It's now it's a matter practically of conclusion. You see the prevalence of narcolepsy type 1 and type 2 inside of our sample. I will go pretty fast, but look at this number. 66.7% of the subjects recognized as narcoleptic by IFORD were already diagnosed by a physician. First, I am very happy. I am the father of IFORD. It means that IFORD is pretty good. 67% of the cases that he was recognized are diagnosed by a physician. You know, in a validation of a system that is able only to give you 67% of diagnosis approved by a physician is a computer, a stupid computer, but at 67% is not so bad, is the minimum that I can say. But you have another conclusion from that, is that 33% of the general population of the narcoleptic in the general population are not diagnosed. They are not diagnosed. It means that they are not treated. It means that they are completely underserved and that we have not done enough effort to teach what is narcolepsy to our GPs. That we have to do efforts again. It's at a third also implication, is that the number of people that are not recognized as narcoleptic can be at any period of their life. Suppose that I am telling you that is during childhood that the diagnosis of narcolepsy is the worst. It has multiple consequences for the life of these children because they can be totally handicapped in their studies, in their future, And is not only a treatment, it's also a matter of life. If these children cannot have a normal life because they were not diagnosed enough earlier, this is a problem. So in my conclusion, very quickly, narcolepsy is a rare disorder affecting 37%, 37 subjects on 100,000. The symptoms characterizing this disease are, however, relatively frequent in the general population. It is their combination that is infrequent. The results point out that cataplexy is different of narcolepsy, and that is the most disturbing conclusion of this study, because it's going against what, as sleep specialists, we were taught. And the question remains about, for sure, the subjects that are falling out of the SCSD. So what is happening to the subjects that are not recognized as narcoleptic? This is probably another story, but I will tell you that is the problem of idiopathic hypersomnia. And presently, idiopathic hypersomnia is a potpourri in which we put all our narcoleptic not diagnosed. This is incorrect. Idiopathic hypersomnia exists as a prevalence and must be recognized and treated. Again, this is another story, and probably I will have the opportunity to speak about that later inside of this symposium. Thank you, everyone.